Hi, my name is Corey, and I have had numerous encounters with ghosts, and I both adore and love scary shit.
My name is Ashley, and I have not had so many encounters with ghosts, but not entirely a skeptic. And I am a super history enthusiast.
And welcome to
The Ghostery Channel. All right, today we're going to be talking about the Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. It's been fully operational since the 1800s. We went there just recently and were able to walk around the grounds. It was fantastic. It was
Beautiful.
Really interesting. It was super gorgeous and a little spooky considering we stayed after dark. It was very cool. It is huge. It is 135 just sprawling acres.
I hit my step count.
Yeah, definitely hit the step counts and the inclines.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, nice level of hills. We don't have mountains in our area, at least, but we do have lots of hills. The cemetery was founded in 1847 by William Haxall, and Joshua is in fact buried in the cemetery, and they were inspired by the Mount Auburn Cemetery in Boston and came home to Richmond and wanted just a very arboreal, pretty cemetery for people to spend time in and reflect in and everything, and they got it.
They succeeded. Yeah, it's gorgeous. I mean, I haven't seen anything that beautiful. Eerie. Gorgeous.
But, absolutely a place we saw lots of people doing walks, walking dogs, just enjoying what comes across almost as a park more than just a cemetery.
And though it was, and though it was spooky, I mean, have we ever seen a cemetery that's not spooky yet somewhat gorgeous at the same time?
I mean, every cemetery is just, I think that's human nature. Well, I think that's a very American view of cemeteries. They're spooky, they're unknown, oh my god, death. So yeah, I mean, any cemetery is it's something about the fact that we keep the bodies there preserved. And then there's all the little stones staring back at you.
Oh, yeah. It's very ominous. And despite its loveliness, there are claims that the cemetery is haunted. Groundskeepers, locals, and tourists have actually said that they hear cries at night, experience unfortunate deaths while they're there, and then that they've actually seen ghostly figures roaming the cemetery at night.
And a few less spooky elements of haunting. There's also a rather beloved dog.
Yes.
Said to haunt. We'll definitely be talking.
I want to take him.
If we didn't bring the ghost dog home with us because of her, I'll be surprised.
Right.
If we start hearing ghost barking, there'll be an entire video on how Corey got us haunted by a ghost dog somehow.
You know what? It will fulfill my dream.
I'm sure it will. Okay, so interesting facts about Hollywood Cemetery. There are, 3 presidents, 2 U.S. presidents, and then 1, not U.S. president.
Okay, so which presidents?
Okay, so we have the 5th president, James Monroe. We have the 10th president, John Tyler. And then we have the first and only president of the failed Confederate States of America, Jefferson Davis.
Are there any other Confederates there?
So many. There are so many Confederates there. There are so many Confederates there that there is an enormous pyramid monument to all of the Confederate soldiers.
Which we will touch base on in a second.
Yes.
Okay. So, I was not aware of the presidents being there to an extent where we saw the president's circle, and I took pictures of it. But we'll have to touch base a little bit more on their facts and details in a second, because it was, I don't know, I couldn't focus besides knowing that there's 18,000 Confederate soldiers buried there, and all their gravestones stare at you. That's all I can focus on. So, and so now I'm pretty sure there's a high chance that a Confederate a-hole followed us home. Not the dog, the Confederate asshole.
If any ghosts followed us home, they followed her home. Yes. I would like to point this out. She gets the issues with ghosts, okay? She gets followed home. I did not bring anything home.
Yes, I bring home the ghost. So, the first stop on our trip to the Hollywood Cemetery was the Confederate Memorial Pyramid, and it was actually quite ominous. and ostentatious, I guess is the best word to say. It was hugely erected, massive pyramid in the cemetery that is just to honor the Confederate soldiers. And it's actually, I mean, your eyes cannot help but be drawn to it.
It's a little out of place. So overall, Hollywood Cemetery is a gorgeous, almost park-like feeling. Just trees and rolling hills and typical gravestones. You have a great number, actually, considering most of our cemeteries around here. You have a number of the standard headstones, and then you have a lot of larger displays for wealthier families. You have a lot of large family plots, and some of them very elaborate. And then out of nowhere, and I'm sure in the video we did talk about it, as you're walking over, suddenly from behind a large magnolia tree emerges just this pyramid. This rather out of place pyramid.
That walking towards the pyramid, the trees are in the way, so it actually looks like it disappears. Like it moved. Until, of course, you move past the beautiful magnolia tree to see the quite disturbing, yet gargantuan pyramid that is here.
But it was erected to honor the 18,000, correct? Yeah, the 18,000 Confederate soldiers who are buried there, largely from battles nearby, some of them Virginia natives, but a number of whom are from out of state, died in the battles near Virginia or near Richmond, and were brought to be buried here for ease.
Yep. It was actually created by the Hollywood Ladies Memorial Association in 1866. It's actually like 90 feet tall.
It is 90 feet tall. That thing is tall. 90 feet. It is super tall. You don't really expect it until you're standing there looking up at that pile of stone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the stone is interesting in itself. Is they have tick marks on it, and we'll insert a clip with Ashley talking about it.
So all the marks, the striations on the edges of the stone seem to be either like metal pieces that they used, if you see they go the full length on these, that they used to split the stone and shape it, or a consequence of its construction or transport here, because it's so regular and it's on so many of them on the very edges of the stone.
It's very interesting. And that there's gaps as well in the stone, so I was like trying to shine my flashlight in between, and I was like, maybe I could, see something in there, or maybe something would reach out and grab my hand, because I was hoping for something like that. Unfortunately, the only thing that could probably fit through those gaps are rodents, reptiles, like a snake or something. But
insects.
Yeah.
But we are not sure about the interior of this structure, how solid it is on the inside, if it's similar stones with gaps all the way through.
Yeah.
I was fully ready for if she got grabbed by a ghost hand, I probably would have grabbed her, but I was halfway expecting to just take a moment afterward to be like, you brought that on yourself.
Well, to just clarify, so there was rumor that the pyramid is haunted. Apparently people hear moaning at night, at dusk and at night, because they think that the soldiers who did not go home, or maybe who were not identified because their bodies were destroyed, were misplaced, and they are trying to find their way home. And people say you can also feel cold spots near the pyramid. I put my face up against the pyramid. My face was plastered, and I'm cold. I'm a cold person. And so I did not identify any other, colder spots. It was cold stone. It was 50 degrees. I mean,
it was not that cold a day, but no, the stone was very much just stone. Even for her who gets cold all the time, no particular cold spots or anything.
No moans.
The only, no moaning, no groaning, no tortured souls wailing from inside the pyramid that we encountered. The only sounds we heard a lot of the local wildlife, the squirrels chittering at each other, growling at each other, hopping all around.
Just wonders if the moaning is just the traffic that people hear.
Or all the squirrels.
Or all the squirrels throwing nuts and acorns
And chattering.
and barking and chattering at each other. So I don't know. It's a little eerie here at night because you do hear all the animals rustling in the leaves, etc.
And
But
the train when it was running a minute ago.
the train was running a minute ago, so that was a little eerie because I don't like trains. But so far we don't hear any moaning.
There is a train station just down the hill along the water side. It is very loud when the trains are coming in and out of the station. The only things that we heard were the trains coming behind and along the cemetery and the groaning of their brakes a little bit, because one did pass while we were standing there by the pyramid itself. One had just finished coming into the station, and you can hear the screeching and the groaning of the brakes. I imagine at full dark it's a little more unnerving.
Yeah, we got there. It was probably about maybe 4. No, we got there at like 3:30, and by 5 it was still dusk. And they closed at like 5:30 at max. So we were trying to rush back to get everything done because we didn't want to get locked in.
Yeah, the caretaker had to let us out of the gate at like 5:10, maybe, and he had to open the gate to let us out.
Now, it was still like twilight, I guess, or so if we had been able to stay until like full dark, maybe like 10 p.m., I want to know if I would still hear the moans. But it's in Richmond, and it's a college town, and there are major highways and roadways next to it.
Fair, yeah, no, you will definitely see in some of the clips and some of the photos that it is very much a juxtaposition of the new and the old right there.
Yeah.
Standing in even President's Circle, which is the far side of the older parts of the cemetery, you can definitely see directly over the hills into the city. There's the modern buildings and the skyline of Richmond. There's very much highway traffic that you can definitely hear from around the cemetery when you do get those muscle cars that totally aren't compensating for anything coming by on the highway. So it is a little hard to get complete silence at times, but it's not overly loud. Like, you can definitely, it's a very peaceful place, but it's very much smack dab alongside Richmond and within hearing of 95.
So I don't know if I'm going to hear a ghost moaning even at 10 p.m. at night.
Yeah, you're more likely to hear the trucks going by 95.
Yes. Unfortunately, I really wanted to hear the moaning.
Yes, we did not get any moaning on this venture. But, again, to be fair, we were there until, like, 5:10. Twilight, the cemetery does close down early in the winter, and we did not have any particularly strong microphones or anything with us to check that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we got no moaning.
No moaning.
We got no groaning, no wailing, no tortured soul coming out of the pyramid to grab Corey and haul her away.
I was waiting for that. I wanted to be like the mummy, just like somebody reach out and grab me.
I was very much waiting for a ghostly hand to grab you.
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
But, yeah, nothing this time. This time. So for the headstones, looking around the 18,000 Confederate graves that are in this cemetery, we did find some interesting differences in the headstones themselves.
It was very interesting because some of them were marble, some of them are granite, and we will insert a clip of us talking about it because we were just really intrigued of why some of them are different colors and why some of them have their rank and some of them didn't. There are just so many headstones, and it's funny because stone differs per gravestone. Some look like a white stone, some look like granite, some are darker gravestone. So we'll have to look into if that is a purposeful decision. Maybe families could pay for a better stone, or if it was a decision on the cemetery itself, the Hollywood Cemetery Association.
Marble, we see a rank private on most of these here, and on the gray granite we see no rank listed, except for one here. I do see private listed. So we'll have to keep looking into why the stones are picked as they are.
Quite unnerving though, having all of the headstones just pointing at your direction, staring at you essentially. I mean, of course, it doesn't help that 1, it's a haunted cemetery, and then 2, these were all Confederate soldiers. So there's that unnervingness to it as well. So I wonder if this is their actual grave, like were their bodies buried here? Because you would think a Georgia Confederate soldier, their family would want them buried in Georgia.
Now, if I remember correctly, the Confederate soldiers buried here died in the battles near this location, and so were buried here in Richmond. And the newer gravestones that we see now were added after the fact. But I do believe that they are graves. They're buried here, not cenotaphs, just memorials.
Now, clearly, a number of these have been replaced since they were originally interred there. Very clearly, a lot of these headstones are newer, replaced after the fact. Definitely, they are not from
No.
the 1800s, like, at all. Clearly, there were some new ones that had been replacing older headstones or were placed after the fact to provide names beyond just the period memorial. Not quite sure. It is difficult to find information on why some of the headstones had their rank listed and why some of them only had the unit that the individual was in. But
we'll have to do more research on that and see what we find. It's very curious because I'm wondering if we go to other grave sites,
yes,
we'll have the same. We'll figure it out.
But yeah, we'll look into it. Okay, so this one is very much Corey's area.
So there is a urban legend. Well, I guess not even an urban legend. There was a little girl. It just says C.A. Reese on her family plot, and she has a little. It was a bassinet, and you can leave offerings. But right next to the bassinet, there is what looks to be maybe like a golden retriever dog. And this little girl happened to die of scarlet fever, and she died at the age of 3. And so basically, there are speculations that the dog was placed there to protect her in the afterlife. What's fun is that apparently the dog's haunted. Apparently the little girl, she can be seen playing with her dog. Sometimes there's been reports of hearing a little girl laughing and throwing a ball. What's also intriguing is sometimes you can hear the growling of a dog when you are approaching her gravesite. We did not hear any growls, unfortunately.
No.
And I will definitely insert some clips as we recorded while we were there. So you're supposed to be able to hear the dog growl when it's at dusk and at night. The only thing we can hear right now is the local train coming by, which is eerie in itself, but it's not quite what we were looking for. There's also stories that the little girl will come out and play with her dog. You can hear her giggling. And of course, the dog was placed here as a symbol of protection for the little girl. So maybe we'll hear the little girl play at some point. But it's just very interesting because I wanted to take the dog home.
Corey very much wanted to take the dog home. We went back to the little girl Reese's gravesite 3 times, actually. Yeah, 3 times, so that Corey could look and see if possibly the dog had, because the grave, the groundskeepers have left reports. They've told stories about the dog.
It changes direction, apparently. So if you walk towards her, like, from the right, the dog will be facing the right. But when you come back, it's facing the opposite direction. So many of the groundskeepers said that it moves at night, and then they hear growling. And so it was our first stop there when we visited, and it was our last stop before we left. And it was dark enough you had your lights flashing just to make sure that we could be seen, but we still didn't hear any dog barking. But to be fair, we passed a couple who had a dog, so even if we had heard growling, we would have just assumed it was that dog.
Yes.
You know. But unfortunately, we didn't see anything haunted there. I was really looking forward to it. Dog lover here. I will not snatch headstones of dogs or anything like that. But I am a dog lover, and so I was really hoping to bring home a ghosty little pupper. And while we were at the Hollywood Cemetery, we did see some beautiful ornate headstones. I mean, when we talk about just the 18,000 soldiers, it's gorgeous. But when you actually view the whole entire cemetery, you see some beautiful headstones and some mausoleums. And I'll let you talk about it because I know I have a video clip that I'll be showing. So some fancy gravestones over here. Very fancy. Something I will never be able to afford, and neither will my family, because we don't have that type of money, and I'm probably just going to be thrown on a funeral pyre on the backyard. However, we gotta wonder, what did Anton do over here, Mr. Osterbine? Because you, though you have a fancier gravesite than most, your family's over here. Who would you piss off in your family that you got banished to the other side of the graveyard?
And fenced in so he couldn't get out.
Maybe he has been trying to get out.
Corey did have to remind me that we had limited time before the cemetery closed, because I was completely enthralled the whole way through, taking pictures of so many ornate, gorgeous graves, family plots, mausoleums, tombs, including tombs in the side of the hill. There were a number of absolutely gorgeous spots where they had the tomb doors cut into the side of the hill, and so it was underground, and some of them wrought iron fences protecting them, some of them with gorgeous like walkways up to the entryway to the tomb.
There are so many baby ones, like infant children, who, you know, passed away, and so there were some bassinets, there were some just a little girl reading. She was perched leaning over like this, and she was reading a book, and
and we'll include that picture as well. It was a gorgeous statue of this little girl, very alive, just super realistic. You would not have known it was a statue until you approached, of her laying on her stomach, just reading a book and smiling, and clearly just a very beloved memory. But definitely the sadness and melancholy that you would get, and it was a very peaceful and respectful place, people walking through quietly, just enjoying, but there were definitely a lot of very loved people buried here, very gorgeous, ornate gravestones, and then some that were rather simple, but still had just very, very loved items left for them, wreaths left for them for the holidays. A number of the child's grave sites
had like little places where you can leave offerings.
A lot of toys left for the children, especially at little girl Ree's gravesite, but along multiple of them where you would see someone had left a toy, a bow, just cute little things for the children who were buried there. And just overall, absolutely gorgeous cemetery.
Yeah, even if you don't want to see the Confederate section, or if you don't want to go and, you know, see if there's hauntings, it's a lovely place to walk through. One, just beautiful views. Everybody there was super friendly, because it was quite busy when we went. Everybody was super friendly and super nice. And you know what? How often do you get to walk through such a beautiful, gorgeous, with like beautiful willows and magnolia trees? You know, how often do you get to do that?
And to see the history surrounding you, it very much is a walk through history between the presidents. There's 2 associate justices of the U.S. Supreme Court buried there. A number of just very historic grave sites. Even just talking about the timing, you can see an entire family plot starting from like the mid 1800s, and then you can just see the generations up until the late 1900s, where you can watch the progression of the gravestones, and you can see these dates, and it's very much just a beautiful walk through history.
Oh, very gorgeous. So while we were at the Hollywood Cemetery, we actually did walk through the President's Circle, and I'll leave it up to the history buff to tell you some interesting facts about the President's Circle and other historical figures that are actually buried at the cemetery.
Yeah. So, for context, when we say history buff, my undergrad is in history.
Nerd.
Admittedly, very, very much so a history nerd here. So I adored being able to look into some of the history of Hollywood Cemetery, and of course, the biggest pieces of famous national history that are in this cemetery is the fact that there are 2 presidents of the United States and the president of the Confederate States of America all buried at Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. So, as far as who's buried there, we mentioned earlier, James Monroe was buried there. He is the 5th president. Now, James Monroe was the last of the founding fathers to be president of the United States. And by founding fathers, it is those statesmen who helped craft the various documents that ended up founding this country, who were involved in the actual start of the Revolutionary War, and he is the last of that group of statesmen who were involved in most of those parts to have been elected president. So he served from 1817 to 1825, and he was a Democratic Republican. So the Democratic Republicans weren't exactly the inheritors of Federalist or Anti-Federalist. It's a long story, but the end result is that James Monroe was the last of an era of both the Virginia dynasty, of those Virginia founding fathers, of which we surprisingly have many.
Yes.
And he was the last president that could really be called Democratic Republican. Now, the thing that he did that had very much a lasting impact on American history was something called the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah.
Monroe Doctrine is essentially a foreign policy doctrine. It's very much where the U.S. decided that the rest of the old world, all of Europe, needed to stay out of the U.S.'s backyard. It's not a little bit condescending and colonialist. It was very, very heavy-handed that the U.S. was deciding that this entire hemisphere was ours now. And Europe can just, we don't need other colonizers here. No. We're gonna be the only colonizers around this neighborhood. So Monroe Doctrine is where that was very much put into words and instituted as American foreign policy. It was explicitly stated that Europe was to stay out of the Americas, both North and South, and that any incursion, any move for European powers to reclaim territory in the Americas or to try to institute new colonies, basically any influence that they exerted in the Americas would possibly be taken as aggression, and the U.S. might just square up and go to war with you. But this all started with James Monroe. It was actually written out, authored by John Quincy Adams, who was also a president after Monroe. He was Secretary of State at the time, and he was also son of John Adams, the earlier president and founding father. So this very much was a doctrine that this was not just Monroe himself. This was very much a coordinated foreign policy that the Americas dealt with for a long time. Mm-hmm. And, okay, after Monroe, the next president that was buried in Hollywood Cemetery was John Tyler. John Tyler was 10th president of the United States, served from 1841 to 1845. John Tyler, he's not particularly liked. Like, poor guy gets kind of a bad rap.
Tell me more.
He accidentally became president.
Yes.
John Tyler was not actually elected. He took office after the president at the time, William Henry Harrison, the 9th president, died shortly into office. Mm-hmm. John Tyler was actually supposed to be, he was on the ticket as vice president and intended to serve as vice president. When Harrison died, John Tyler very unexpectedly became president. He had not been considered a threat politically up to this point, and so lead Whig Party members, such as Henry Clay, did not like this. This was not expected. They did not have the same kind of relationship with John Tyler, and ended up doing a lot of work to kind of keep him in his box. Yeah. So John Tyler's presidency, he served one term, he served the remainder of Harrison's term, and it was somewhat status quo. He didn't make a lot of earth-shattering changes. Mm-hmm. He very much kept the country at status quo. It was very much a politically tense presidency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no doubt.
Yeah. But yeah, John Tyler really, he didn't deserve quite the bad rap he gets as far as just, forgettable.
Dude was just trying to do his job.
But yeah, he was vice president and just kind of got dropped
wanted
right
to,
in.
lay back and just be not acknowledged. Didn't
Just
want to be perceived.
I'll be the vice president. I'm here to support you. I'm here to, go in and keep things good with the Senate and da-da-da-da-da. And then...
Tell me about the a-hole who did try to screw us over.
Okay, a-holes who did try to screw us over. Early part. So, also buried, not directly in President's Circle, unsurprisingly, but within sight of President's Circle, nearby, was Jefferson Davis. Okay, Jefferson Davis was elected the first and only president of the Confederate States of America. But then the CSA lost the war, and so...
Yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah, we don't need him.
We're not really going to embellish more. Fuck that guy.
Jefferson Davis, they lost and surrendered, and that's all you need to know.
Yeah. He's burning in hell. Okay. He's burning in hell. Okay. So tell me about some more Confederate generals or
okay,
dudes who might ruin the night at the cemetery.
There are 28 Confederate generals buried at Hollywood Cemetery.
Yeah.
28 of them. Now, admittedly, that's all the highest ranking and then lower ranking generals, but out of 28 of them, we're going to talk about one. Just the one. So, George Pickett. Poor George Pickett's name is known for exactly one thing. It's called Pickett's Charge. Pickett's Charge did not go well. So, to be fair, this is not entirely Pickett's fault. Specifically because it was originally not called Pickett's Charge. Originally, this was called the Pickett-Pettigrew-Trimble Charge.
It's a mouthful.
Because, of course, we're all lazy and no one's going to rattle that off. But there were 3 generals who, under orders from General Longstreet, who was explicitly ordered by General Robert E. Lee to make this charge, this particular rough plan of attack, and Longstreet was given the task of execution and handed it down to Pickett, Pettigrew, and Trimble. Now, Pickett's charge went so badly that it has been called the high water mark of the Confederacy. It is the farthest they got into the north. That is the point where then everything started to recede. This is considered the turning point, not just in battle, but in morale in the South. This went so bad, the South gave up. So, Pickett's charge. On the Confederate side, 1,123 soldiers were killed, 4,019 soldiers were wounded, and 3,750 were captured. They lost a lot of men to this effort. On the Union side, there were 6,500 total casualties. That includes their wounded and their killed of any degree. They did all right. And honestly, it paid off for them. Again, the Confederacy never recovered from this. It ended up being what many consider a turning point in the war, and it all just went downhill from there. Later...
Maybe that's why he's shoved into the corner of the cemetery.
Might be why he doesn't get the big fancy spot up near President's Circle and Jefferson Davis. Mm-hmm. But again, this was something, he was a general following the orders and trying to lead what was a laid out plan of attack. General Robert E. Lee said to General Longstreet, I need you to attack this point. General Longstreet sent these 3 generals and their men to attack that particular point in a plan that they laid out. These 3 generals just executed it. And again, poor Pickett just happened to be the first one on the list for the names, and so ended up with Pickett's charge being his legacy, which is, kind of a shame. Kind of sucks, bro. But I will give this guy one thing.
Kind of what you get.
I mean, you were on the losing side, though, so, But I will give this guy one thing. I will give him one bit that I find super amusing. You know what? I'll give him this. When asked years after the battle why his charge failed, why did things go so wrong, Pickett of Pickett's charge, his response, he's quoted as saying, "I've always thought that the Yankees had something to do with it." So definitely sass goals. Like, the sarcasm's on point. The guy just accepted it and decided that he was going to just drag everybody else with him.
Like, what do you think happened? Well, let me tell you a story about the Yankees.
Well, how'd you get shot? Well, the guy who shot me might have had something to do with it. But yeah, so poor Pickett ended up with his name being the primary on this absolutely disastrous turning point of the Civil War. He is also buried at Hollywood Cemetery. I will, one little bit of acknowledgement. The dude had sass for days.
Yeah.
Like, I love that response so much. But that is the only Confederate general we're going to talk about in any sort of detail. Again, 28 of them buried at Hollywood. This was very much a resting place for Confederate soldiers. Primarily, it is Richmond, Virginia, which was the capital of the CSA while it existed. So it was very much where they took their loss to.
Yep. But now we're going to go back to urban legend time.
Yes, we've had enough of Ashley's history nerding.
No, we loved it. We loved it. We all loved it.
We've done the history nerding. Now for the more urban legend part of it.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about the Richmond Vampire, which is a very popular urban legend in Richmond. So it is stemmed from a historical event that happened at Church Hill in Richmond on October 2nd, 1925. A tunnel that was under construction at Church Hill actually collapsed, killed and burying multiple of their workers. People claim that they saw a human figure crawl through the rubble, covered in blood, with his skin hanging off his flesh, and jagged teeth that were really sharp, and that when it was noticed, he actually darted off to the mausoleum of W.W. Poole for hiding, who was an American bookkeeper. It's just really scary because people are like, oh, this thing came out, this creature covered in blood,
came out from under the ground. That's a bit of a frightening image.
Lacerations, flesh hanging off. It's very scary. Now I'm gonna go ahead.
I don't want to say that my first reaction to anything would be, oh my god, zombie, or oh my god, vampire, or anything, but like, absolutely covered in blood, crawling out from under the ground, and like jagged teeth, and like, I'm definitely not going to be like, oh, let me get a closer look. So to be fair, there's probably I can understand a little bit of like, oh god,
who is that? And then
or what?
Claims say that he took off running across the James River and hid in the mausoleum of W.W. Poole. Why him? I don't know. I'll insert a picture of the mausoleum. It's actually a very nice mausoleum.
Yeah, it was a gorgeous spot.
Yeah, it was beautiful. But unfortunately, it's been debunked. It was actually a lot sadder.
Aren't they all?
The real story was Benjamin F. Mosby, who was actually in the tunnel when it collapsed. Apparently, he was a railroad fireman, and he was shoveling coal into a steam engine, and it exploded upon the collapse. And of course, he was standing by it, which resulted in terrible burns, cuts, scrapes. Actually, shattered his teeth because he was hit by debris. So it was awful. Unfortunately, he died. He crawled out of the rubble. He did survive. He crawled out of the rubble enough where they were able to take him to Grace Hospital in Richmond, where unfortunately he died. Despite this being, the true story, people still, of course, love the weird and wicked, and they still refuse to believe that it's the actual story, and they believe that the Richmond Vampire is a real thing. And I just feel awful for the poor guy, because on one hand, like, part of me is like, please be a vampire so you didn't have to suffer such a thing. But realistically, that's what happens when you worked in tunnels back then, and you didn't have all the safety features.
It's all a cover-up. It's all a cover-up.
I wish. I was trying to find his, I found W.W. Poole's mausoleum, but they were tales that you could see him lurking in the shadows behind headstones and stuff, or behind trees. And I was looking while we were there, and I didn't see anything at night, which is unfortunate. Like, of course, I like the heebie-jeebie stuff, but I also am a scaredy cat, so I would approach him, scream, be fascinated, and run away, or die. Just have a heart attack, But I was really hoping to see something creepy. Even though I read the history and it was debunked, I was still hoping there was still something there.
We did linger, we did look around at W.W. Poole's mausoleum for a good few minutes. We walked around and looked and peered in the doorway from outside the gate from where you can see. And no lurking figures. No vampire came after us.
No vampire that we know of, unless he's lurking outside on our balcony right now, which I don't know how I'd feel about that, as long as he's not like Edward from Twilight. Don't be creepy. But unfortunately, so as far as we know, the poor gentleman, Benjamin Mosby, died. And
Sad.
He inadvertently became a legend, probably not in the way that he wanted to, but
I don't know if on one hand you're remembered, on the other hand you're remembered in a rather gruesome and awful way. But I don't know. On one hand, you know what? Yeah. Tell scary stories about me. Let me be a cryptid. Like, let me just be weird and confusing and make people wonder for years and years. Like, yeah, okay, I could be okay with, like, oh yeah, no, she was totally a vampire.
Oh yeah.
Like, she came out of the ground and attacked people, and now she's lurking there in the darkness. Sure, remember me. Works for me. It'll be fun.
I mean, at least vampire's cool. My family will probably just call me Nomeo until the day I die, and then it'll be passed on to generations, and then I'm just expected, like, they're gonna think I was a gnome. Like, I was like, what, 3 feet tall?
There won't even be, it'll just be the fact that, like, 3 generations from now, someone in the family will have passed down, like, oh yeah, we had a Nomeo once. Yeah, I remember Nomeo, good old Nomeo. And that'll be passed down. And so, like, 4 generations from now, there will be people in the family completely convinced that there was a member of her family called Nomeo. And
they're going to write it in
no records. It was a secret.
The family genealogy, they're going to cross out Corey and put in Nomeo. Yeah.
Maybe not Greg would.
Greg would.
Greg absolutely would.
If my mother gets a genealogy book, oh yeah.
Greg absolutely. And that would be the copy handed down.
Oh yes. I will be Nomeo until the day I die. So I think, it's unfortunate the way he did die. It's unfortunate because he wasn't the only one who died. There were numerous other deaths.
Yeah, it was a tragedy.
His death. I mean, it's a tragedy, but it's an awesome tale.
Yeah, quite a story. I'm sure the newspapers at the time just ran with it.
Oh yeah.
No doubt.
Richmond vampire should look like. But
of course. Imagination is a powerful thing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can stare at the ceiling at night. I love the darkness. I sleep in pitch black. But I can stare and see, like, a little bit of reflection of light off the ceiling and think that it's something moving. And then I'm sitting there like, dear God, don't be Chucky. Don't be Chucky.
We watched a video the other night, and there was a reference to people in the attic. And this has been a long-held fear for Corey.
A man living in the attic.
We have gone house touring looking for places, and a number of attic entrances, and we've seen some where people had like a sliding bolt on the attic entrance, and the immediate she notices.
So the reason why I noticed is because I was once dating a guy, and he went house hunting, and one of the houses had a bolt on the attic entrance, and I had asked the real estate agent why was that there. And she said in older homes, they all shared the same attic entrance because there were no firewalls between the units. And so Joe Schmo could climb up his attic, come over to your house and drop down and be in your house and you wouldn't even know. So I'm terrified of that happening. I refuse to look at older homes. I'm like, no, or without like an inspection saying that there's a firewall there. If there's brick in the way, I'm okay. But if there is no brick and it's just a shared attic space, it's gonna get bolted.
But even just seeing the attic access like door panel that you can push out of the way, Corey starts eyeing it, wondering. And putting a bolt on that. As soon as I move in, just put a bolt.
I love spooky shit, but I hate spooky shit, and I don't want The Grudge or some other. Okay,
Just
a regular old human.
creep. Yeah.
I don't want a human living in my house without me being aware.
We were the real monsters all along. Okay, that's the moral of the story.
Yes. I don't want that.
But yeah, we were watching that recently, and one of those stories, and that night, as we were like wrapping up, like, okay, good night, you had to make a comment about like, I'm gonna have trouble sleeping. I'm gonna be eyeing my ceiling. I know there's not even attic access, but like I'm gonna be looking in my closet and stuff. Well, I guess there's not room for anyone to hide there. What about there? No one could hide there.
No.
And she starts rattling off. And so that was just the other night. We had a very unsettling night. I spent about 15 minutes going, why'd she put that in my head?
You know what? I'm sorry you had a very unsettled night because I slept like a baby because I know nothing can fit in my closet. Nothing human can fit in my closet because I have it packed. I have 2 closets and they're both packed. So if a human can manage it, he must be like a beanpole and disappears when he stands sideways.
In which case you can just snap him in half and it's fine.
I don't even know how you get in the closet.
So this is what you need to know about what's going on here. She starts this. She starts things, gets worked up, starts like, well, I wonder if, what if someone's in the attic? What if someone's hiding in our closets?
And the best part is, I want something in my attic. I hate it, but I want something in my attic, but I'm terrified.
So she's like, I kind of want to see it. So what if it did? What if someone was in the attic? What if there's a ghost that followed us home? And she starts all this and gets it all, worked up and everything. And then 5 minutes later, when it's time for bed, she's just like, okay, not a problem anymore. I'm not worried. And she sleeps like a baby. And she's gotten me worked up to where I'm like, that's ridiculous. I'll just turn the flashlight on my phone and, okay, no one's lingering around my bed. It's fine. Okay, now I can go to sleep. But
I'm doing my job correctly then.
It's a plot, I tell you.
But we'll get back on point. Though we did not get to see anything spectacular.
No vampires.
No little girl with a barking dog. And no moaning soldiers. It was still a very beautiful cemetery, rich with history. Yes. And I had a great time.
It was a wonderful time. Yeah. It was absolutely gorgeous. It was fascinating, every bit of history, the oldest grave sites that were there.
Oh yeah.
To the still active cemetery where newer graves are being placed. Oh yeah. Newer memorials and cenotaphs. And just gorgeous beauty of this very arboreal.
And the landscaping was gorgeous.
Oh yes.
Those beautiful trees.
Shout out to the caretakers.
We saw
of Hollywood Cemetery.
We saw 8 groundskeepers riding around in their little John Deere
golf
trucks.
Carts and yeah. Probably I think about 8 of them that we saw throughout our time there, and or at least a lot of them, and they do good work. Clearly, it is absolutely gorgeous. And if you get a chance to stop by Hollywood Richmond Cemetery, need Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, if you need a place to go for a walk in Richmond, just want to see something interesting, see some history, well worth a walk. Yeah. Just be aware, they close the gates at 5 in the winter and 6 in the summer. Yeah. And the caretakers the groundskeepers are very good. They're very kind. They hang out near the gate for a good while after closing to let you out, in case you're late, like we were.
There are several stray cats that come into the funeral. The cemetery. One of them was lurking by the Jeep as we were trying to leave. He was a tiny little gray and white little thing, and of course, I'm trying to run out and catch it.
It was by a narrow margin that we didn't come home with a stray kitten.
Yeah. He was a cutie, but it is beautiful. Again, lots of wildlife to see, and just gorgeous.
Well worth a visit. Well worth a walk through.
Yeah.
And
once you're done with the cemetery, you can go over to Rest in Pieces, which is an occult shop right across the street.
A taxidermy occult shop, a block from the cemetery. They made the most of their location. They were very friendly, very, very kind, and it was a very fun store to walk through. So yeah, pop right next door to Rest in Pieces.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I mean, again, it's an occult shop, so there's, crystals, and there's smudge sticks and stuff like that. There are lots of weird shit on the walls.
Well, and, creepy crawlies and
things in jars, like
resin,
heads and
yeah.
stuff that,
Yeah.
so just don't linger too long in there if you get
very
squeamish.
interesting, very
Yeah.
interesting store to visit. But
Yeah.
not a sponsorship, we swear.
No.
Just a place we had fun walking
Yeah.
through. But overall, it was a fantastic trip. If you need somewhere to go in Richmond, walk through Hollywood Cemetery.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
And
for joining us today. And
Thank you for joining us today, and better luck finding some ghosts and ghostly barkings and wailing souls than we did.
And if you are a watcher and you did experience any ghosts or little girls playing or moaning, please let me know. Please tell me in the comments and give us a like. But I want to know, so I need to know when you went and when I can actually go back and experience it myself. I want something to happen.
Anyone's got any stories about Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond? She would love to have more evidence and another reason to go back and look, especially about the dog. I know she's dying that we didn't hear the dog. So,
yeah.
ghost dog stories, please.
Please. Please.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Have a great night.
Joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Have a great one.